So I was not planning on making a video of this, so that is why my car is halfway taken apart and this video is just starting. But I was changing my Upstream O2 sensor because it had gone bad. I had some fuel codes that kind of pointed to the high pressure fuel pump being bad. And then a few days later, the AFR in the car just stayed at 14.7, which is stoic for this car, or any car really, so that's what it should be around at idle, but it was just stuck there all the time and it wouldn't move at all. So that pretty much told me, and the codes, the car ended up throwing different codes for the O2 sensor, which is the Upstream one. And that is the one that is closest to your turbo on your downpipe. So it'll be the top one at the top of the engine, basically. And it is going to be back here. I'll turn the flash on in a second and show you better. But it is really tricky to remove. And a lot of people say you have to take the downpipe out to change it. And I figured out a really easy way to get it out without having to take the downpipe out. So then I figured I should probably make a video on that to make it a little bit easier for anyone else who is having trouble with this. So for starters, the easy part of this is remove your airbox, remove your intake tube. I just twisted mine off to the side. And then I also removed the cowl here, which is really easy. You just pop off these vents here, and then there'll be some bolts, some plastic clips, and then torque screws on the side. Take that all off, pull it out. And a little tip with this is cut some slits in this plastic part of your cowl, because you don't really see it anyways. And if you don't do that, you have to take your wipers off every single time you take the cowl off, and that is a huge pain, and they're hard to align, they're hard to get off. I just don't do that because I've had to replace wiper parts because of that. So just don't take your wipers off unless you have to, but that's a really easy way to get around it. And then to get the O2 sensor off, I'll show you on the old one here. You can see it has this plug, and there's normally like a clip on each side. You have to press down. There's a clip on here that you press down and kind of pull out a little bit. And then there's another clip on the wiring harness of the car. And those are really difficult to get out, but since you have the cowl off, you can pretty much pull them up here to where it's really easy to get to. And you pretty much just have to use a flathead screwdriver and pry at it and try to pull the clips down with your fingers. And you'll eventually get it out. You can see how this one is all broken and torn up because I ended up just breaking the clips off so they weren't holding on to it anymore. And then I just used a flathead screwdriver to pry that out. And that only took a few minutes, but if you don't do that and you just try pulling it out with your hands, you're gonna have a rough time. So just go ahead and go straight to that method. It doesn't matter if you break something on the old one anyways, so I ended up just tearing that one up. And then to remove your O2 sensor, you're going to need one of these specialized O2 sensor sockets. Here's the one I have for my 2013 Focus ST, and this will go around the wire of it. So you don't have to use like a crescent wrench, and you just put that around the wire. And whenever you put this in your car, make sure you orient it where the part that the socket goes in, where the battery goes in, is on this side. So you want it to be on the left side. So you'll find your wire, run it down, reach your hand back behind here. You can see, I guess the bung is kind of covered right now, but since I already took mine out, there's that empty bung on my downpipe there. That's what it'll be. And you'll put this down there and have it to where it's sticking to the left because you have way more room that direction. And then what I did was I took one of these long extensions and then one shorter extension, which I don't know where the actual one I used was because it should have an adapter on it, but I don't really know where that ended up going. But basically I just use two extensions here because if it's too short, it'll hit stuff in the engine bay, and if it's too long, it'll hit stuff in the engine bay. So you have to get it to where the top is like right around here in this empty space. And then I have an adapter. I don't know where it even like went to, but it's an adapter that goes from this 3/8, right? I don't know the right size, whatever. But you know, the breaker bar, this is the socket I was using, and this ratchet would not get the O2 sensor out no matter how hard I pulled. And I was wearing gloves. I also recommend wearing gloves down there, because if you put a lot of pressure on the O2 sensor and then all of a sudden snaps, there's a lot of sharp stuff down there you can cut your hands on. And this just kind of allows you to get a better grip on it. So the best method is to get these extensions, get an adapter so you can attach them to a breaker bar, or just use an O2 sensor socket that is the same size as a big breaker bar. And then, so there's you kind of have to orient yourself in a certain way to get it out easy. But essentially you'll have your breaker bar here, attach it to your extensions, and you'll have it like this. And since there's this much space in between you and the car, you pretty much have to lay across your engine bay and reach your left hand down and hold the end of this right here, and hold this and make sure that it does not move on your socket, because if it gets like tilted or crooked on your socket, you can on the O2 sensor, you can very easily strip it. So you do not want to strip that, because that would be a nightmare. So hold this down, make sure that it is completely engaged with the hex on the O2 sensor, and then you'll take your right hand with your breaker bar, and then you pretty much just have to hold it with your left hand and then use your right hand to push as hard as you can with the breaker bar, and it should break loose really easily. It really didn't take a whole lot of pressing for me, so I imagine if you use your full strength, you could pretty much get it out. And then also another tip is, before I did that, I soaked it in some PV Blaster for a couple minutes. I just shined a flashlight down there, sprayed it on there, wiped it off, let it sit for a little bit, and it came right out super easy. And then once you crack it loose, don't use the socket anymore. Just put your hands down there and unthread it, and then pretty much just putting it back in is the same process, just reverse. You don't need to use a breaker bar to tighten it back in, but be really careful when you're putting the O2 sensor, your replaced one, back in, because these can very easily be damaged. And you can see mine has some sort of white buildup on it, which I know can be from silicone being used in the engine, and I'm not really sure where that would have come from my engine. I have used some fuel system cleaners, and I don't know, maybe just some aerosol around the engine. Something ended up getting in there and causing that buildup. But this was an eBay O2 sensor and it went bad. So my advice to you is only use Motorcraft O2 sensors, because you know they are correct and they work and they're quality. This one lasted me less than a year and it was just a generic eBay brand, so stay away from those. But that is pretty much it for this video. Just figured I'd put this tip out there because I've seen a lot of posts on forums about people discussing methods to get these O2 sensors off, and everyone just says take the downpipe out. And trust me, you do not want to take the downpipe out unless you have to. I've done it before and it is a huge pain. You're going to break your V-band clamp, and then you're going to have to go to a Ford dealer and get a new one, because Ford uses a special V-band clamp. It's hard to get out. You have to get the downstream O2 sensor out and unplugged, pull it out from the under side of the car, from the top. So just take my word for it. Do not take your downpipe out unless you have exhausted every other option. For the downstream O2 sensor, you definitely have to take it out. I could not get it out without taking the downpipe out. But that's pretty much it for this video. I was planning on this being short, but now it ended up being fairly long. But that's just how to get the O2 sensor out. The rest of it's pretty much straightforward. But if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'd be happy to help. But please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.